can you talk a little bit about how you define resilience?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for me, resilience is being able to continue to be productive and move forward in the face of all of that adversity that you were talking about. And when I think of adversity, it's not, it's a lot of things. It's technical challenges. It's the risk posture that you're operating within, and it's also relational, the team that you're working with. So all of those things kind of interplay into creating the adverse environment that you operate in. And frankly, for me, resilience is just the ability to continue to operate and produce.
And for you, you don't just see resilience as being able to overcome adversity. You also, in other conversations, you talk to me about how it's about taking advantage of opportunities sometimes, right?
Oh, absolutely. As a project manager, you spend a lot of energy, and we've developed wonderful processes here at NASA to put a plan in place and to execute the plan, factoring in lessons learned from prior history and all those kinds of things. And sometimes we get married to the plan. You may have heard that before. So in my mind, resilience is, frankly, when you're not, you're not simply married to the plan. You're actually looking at the goal that you're trying to achieve, and you're adjusting the plan all the time. And I honestly think that's what resilience is. Resilience is the ability to change your plan and bring your team along with you as you change that plan, moving forward towards the goal. As we had talked earlier, a lot of times you think resilience is how I respond to a bad thing, but I would argue that resilience is equally important in how you respond to a good thing. An example, you may have planned for a test as part of your project, and you planned that test was going to be a 4-week activity, and it was going to cost $1 million, and you're moving forward, everything's going great, and lo and behold, you finish the test in 2 weeks, and it only costs $500,000. A resilient project manager will take advantage of that, either by accelerating something or using those resources, time and money, to reduce risk in a different area.
There are two ideas you mentioned there. One, sort of awareness of opportunities, and we'll come back to that awareness issue later, but also this idea of being nimble. Being resilient means being nimble and being able to respond quickly. There's two themes that came up time and time again in all of our interviews with presenters. The idea of continuous learning as a way of promoting resilience, and the idea of the dissemination of control as a way of promoting resilience among project managers and then among team members. Can you talk about how those two themes in particular might show up here at NASA, but also in general, how does NASA promote resilience among its project managers?
Okay. Well, let's break that down. So let's first talk about continuous learning. Any project manager will tell you that project management is an art, and art is always changing. So the way that we implement projects and the way that we manage them is a constantly evolving activity. It's different depending on what technology area you're working in. It's different depending on what your team looks like, and so you have to be continually learning and adapting the lessons that you learn along the way. And you did hear that from some of the project managers who spoke. And sometimes we misstep, and we need to learn from those missteps and move forward. And I would just expand that to say you should constantly be looking for what are you learning, and how does that learning play into your next steps. And then the latter thing that you mentioned, it's the nimbleness and control. And I got to tell you, as a former project manager, I know project managers are a little bit control freaks. And there's nothing wrong with being in control, but there's a big problem when you over control your project, and you do need to disseminate control to as low a level as possible in your organization, and let people have both the responsibility and the authority to get their work done. It doesn't feel comfortable at first, but eventually you start realizing that you're making so much better progress. And really, as the project manager, your job is to set the vector and let the team move forward.
So project managers disseminating control, I can understand how that can be a challenge, but also very possible. In a technical culture, many technical cultures are risk adverse. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about how dissemination of control, how that idea works here at NASA? Is that something that's easy to do? Does it happen often, or is it a bit of a challenge?
So that's a really good question. I think that we, as an agency, over-control ourselves. Our programs over-control our projects. Our missions over-control our programs. And it's very hard to let go of something and give away the authority and the responsibility to somebody else. But unless we empower people, they're not going to move forward. That's just my bottom. That's kind of where I'm at.
In a previous conversation with me, you talked about a mentor of yours at JSC who had a particular viewpoint about the constraints that projects typically experience, the triple constraints. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So we're all familiar with the diamond, or the triangle, or the stool of project management. So you've got cost, you've got schedule, and you've got technical. And I'll be honest with you, most times we try to over-constrain ourselves because we want to control all three of those. I've got requirements I need to meet within a certain cost and within a schedule. And my mentor told me one time that in any and every project that he had ever been asked to manage, the first thing he did with his supervisor or program manager was negotiate which of those three would be the independent variable. So either he's got flexibility on requirements so that he can, contain cost within the schedule, or he's got some flexibility in cost or schedule to be able to attain the requirements.
Got it. So you can't constrain everything,
Right.
but you have to understand the context well enough to know what can be flexible.